The Titans have assembled. We're here to continue with Kalam's fantastic work on the potential Ethiopic origin of Islam, or at least where the myth originates from a concrete historical base. They built a myth on top of an Ethiopian bishop. And we're joined by Odon Lafontaine, who, when he came online earlier, he said ho, ho, ho. So I suspect he's actually Father Christmas when he's not online with us. I think he looks the part. Don't you agree, guys?
Yeah.
I think so. And then we have Usama Dakdok, who's actually a TV star, who's going on a TV show after this. And then we have JC, who's got a face for radio.
Indeed.
So welcome, everyone. Great to have you here. Kalam, let's start with you. Do an introduction, like who you are, and then we'll go around, and then afterwards we can do a recap and jump into what's new.
Definitely. So, hi guys, I am Kalam from Titans TV. Our channel is dedicated to thought-provoking media, thought-provoking content. We discuss a lot of history, culture. We deal with a lot of ancient civilizations. So we've talked about ancient Egypt, all the way down to Greece, all the way down into Christianity, Roman, Byzantine times, as well as Islam as well. And for the last, I don't know how long, we've been going quite hard on Islam and just finding out what was the origins of Islam. How did Islam actually come about and arrive on the scene? And that has led us to the Abyssinian origin of Islam. And when I say the Abyssinian origin of Islam, it's not to negate that there isn't other origins of Islam. So there definitely is. For example, we discussed the Byzantine origin of Islam in the 6th century that took place as well. That actually, a lot of these forces was just coming together to coalesce to produce the outcome of what Islam emerged became in the 7th, 8th, and 9th century. So so that's me. I'm from Callum from Titans TV, and I love history and just going back into like ancient civilizations and culture and just kind of figure out what took place in history.
Nice, man. Thanks. Yeah, and let's jump over to Odon, and a quick introduction, then we can go to the other two, and then do a recap.
Yeah, hello everyone. Odon Lafontaine here, author of The Great Secret of Islam. And I was also very thrilled by Kalam's presentation last week. He gave us elements that give us food for thought. There might have been a historical figure within Ethiopia or Abyssinia that could have been a model for the writing, the fabrication of the prophet of Islam's character figure within the Islamic tradition. It's very, very interesting, and it's backed by scholar studies a bit. In the meantime, I've read the paper from Nikolai Sinai, Mohammed as an episcopal figure. And it makes a lot of sense. The Islamic tradition portrays Muhammad in a sort of bishop, and it might have been taken from an Ethiopian or Abyssinian bishop, and it's food for thought.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Usama, what makes you join us today?
Well, they told me if I join, you'll send me a nice cup and some coffee beans and stuff like that. I say, hey, here's a product. I'll do it anytime for some stuff like that. No, just curiosity to follow your teaching of last week, because I did not obviously know exactly what you covered. But the topic is obviously it's very important to dig into Islam and the history of Islam, where Islam started, where Islam, how Islam began. And you need to be humble when you talk about Islam. No kidding. Because you think you know everything you need to know about Islam and you teach it with the confidence. And then surprise, 20 years later, you find yourself wrong. And that's exactly the story of the Straight Way of Grace Ministry. I've been doing this ministry now for almost 30 some years on Pal Talk, when there was no the technology and the things which we have today. And I praise God for that. But man, I taught what he taught me. but I was shocked. I found out, 15, 20 years later, that what I've been teaching is wrong. So don't rush to make your opinion about Islam, especially if you are an old school like myself. Just have an open mind to face the reality, and which is Muslims lie. And how do I know Muslims lie? When their lips move, when they write something down, when they tell us about their Muhammad, when they tell us about their Allah and Jibreel and all these good stories we heard as little children. So don't believe have what you not have. Don't believe have what you hear from me, but don't believe anything you hear from the Muslim. How about that? Move on.
Radiel, JC, over to you.
Well, hi everyone. I'm good old JC from Quranic Endgame. Just happy to be here with this excellent panel, as we do on my channel is trying to get to the bottom of what happened 1400 years ago. And now that we are more and more people knowing full well that all of that is a lot of nonsense, it's really good to explore all of the things that were happening in the region and everywhere in the Middle East and so on, to try to understand what happened. So I'm here for the thrill.
Amen.
Sounds pretty good. Yeah. So Kalam, do you want to give us a brief recap of what we covered last week? And just any thoughts on some of the feedback you had, and then we can jump into part 2 and take the discussion further.
Yeah, definitely. So, I don't know. I actually need to share the screen. Let's get that going.
Yeah, just one question. What did you guys, can you give me like maybe JC and Odon, like a 30-second recap of what you took away from last week? Just briefly.
My take on Kalam's presentation. It was very, very interesting because in my opinion, before this presentation, I already knew that Muhammad was a fictional character, a composite figure based on historical figures from the 7th century, warlords and religious leaders, based on the based on the need of the future caliphs to legitimate the Islam and their own power. So I already knew that the Islamic, the Prophet of Islam was not a true historical figure, but it was loosely based on some historical figures.
Yeah, sounds good.
And what I got from Kalam is that there might have been a bishop model as a sort of basis for the building, the construction, the fabrication of the Islamic figure of Muhammad by the late tradition. And it makes a lot of sense because the preacher that is described in the Quran actually acts as a bishop. As a bishop could have acted during this time, a Christian bishop. So the question remains, was he an Ethiopian, Abyssinian bishop, or an Arab bishop? But still there is
30 seconds, hold on. Not 3 minutes, 30 seconds.
Okay, but there's a lot to chew on here.
Right. JC?
Exactly the same thing that Odon has said. The narrative is false. Muhammad of the narrative couldn't have existed as it is described, so they should have used some form of blueprint. And even though we see they have taken from Umar and from Ali and from lots of other people, there seems to be like a big chunk. It would make more sense if they had a big blueprint they copied from. And Kalam has found this person who seems to actually tick so many boxes that we shouldn't ignore.
Right. Yeah, my brief take is you've got, when I did the analysis of the religious vocabulary in the Quran, those 300 words, more than half are from Syria, Iraq area, and then the balance is spread, but you've got a significant portion from Ethiopia and Yemen. So if you think about it, they took from the existing major tradition, which is Judaism and Christianity, but they moved the locus or the place to an empty area in Arabia to start fresh. to create a blank slate, but they still had to make it compatible with the pagan Yemeni culture, the dominant Yemeni culture that was present there. So they had to integrate the Christian / Jewish culture with the pagan Yemeni culture, and we can see there's an interconnectedness. That's my view. And then they built the myth on top of those layers.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kalam, over to you, man. Thank you. This has been really fascinating. A lot of food for thought.
So yeah, right back into it. Just gonna drop a couple of these slides for you guys. So last week we discussed the Abyssinian origin, Abraha and Muhammad, and we went specifically into CIH 541 inscription, which is the Maribdam inscription of Abraham, because personally, I just want to go straight into Arabia during that time frame and who was ruling, what was going on, and the best place to go for that is actually the inscriptions archaeology. So my thesis goes a bit like this. When we ask the question, did Muhammad exist? The answer is, well, yes and no. There was actually an historical Muhammad. He was the Archbishop of Abyssinia. That the legendary Muhammad of the Islamic traditions narrative was based on. The apparent split between the historical and the traditional Muhammad was caused by the numerous vying political parties and propagandists inventing, fabricating, and suppressing stories and reports to further their own agenda. And then there is a part 2 of that, which is the Abyssinian king thesis, or the Negus or the Najashi thesis, which is that the narrative of the legendary Abyssinian king, the Negus, that supported Muhammad was actually based on the historical Abyssinian king called Abraha, who supported the historical Muhammad. Okay. And this is the Abyssinian Bishop Mohammed that we've talked about. And the Umayyads, yeah, this is where we really need to go into, which we shall be touching on in this presentation, is the Umayyads. They were the ones who suppressed and obscured the historical Abyssinian king and Muhammad's identity and narrative to further their own political agenda. Ibn Ishaq further solidified the obscurity and demonization by inventing the mythos that Muhammad was born in the year of the elephant, causing a chronological paradox. So, that's what we went into last week. We touched on that, and then we started going into the mythical figure and just giving you an analogy here of Santa Claus and Muhammad. Both of them are legendary figures that flew mystical beasts into the heavens. But apart from that, they were both based on historical figures. Santa Claus, of course, was based on the 4th century Christian bishop from Byzantium known as Saint Nicholas, whereas Muhammad was based on a 6th century Christian bishop from Abyssinia. I would like to call him Saint Muhammad also. Okay. And we kind of went into details showing you guys about the empire that Abraha ruled. This is coming from Dr. George Hatkay's presentation himself, just showing you the area, the expanse that he ruled all the way north, just south of the borders of the Roman Empire, where the Ghasanids rules, over again north to the east, where the Lahmids rule, all the way down to the south and Himyar and so forth. This is the broad expanse of his empire during the time. So this was his empire, and he established established his empire, but he also established his autocephalic Orthodox Church. And we went through that just to show you, where it's been mentioned, the word Romaeus, which is inside of the inscription. I don't know if you can see my pointer right now. It's, if you see what the number 5 is, and you keep counting the last line at the end right here. I don't know if you can see can you see my, no, you can't see it, can you?
No.
Let's just see it. So right over here.
Oh, there it is. There it is. Yeah.
So right over here, you have, in the Sabaic script, you have the word Romaeus, basically Romaeus. And back in those days, the word Romaeus actually had the meaning of being Orthodox Christian. Just like the word Hellene or Helen had the meaning, it means both Greek, but it also means like pagan literature, pagan times, basically. So the opposite of being Hellenic was to be Romaeus or Roman, which meant he was an Orthodox Christian. So he said, I'm establishing myself as an autocephalous, independent Christian king. And with that, he established, of course, being a monarch of these Orthodox Christian church. He established a bishop in place, and we find out that bishop was, of course, written about inside of Eastern Orthodox literature, as well as the Islamic literature. And the Eastern Orthodox literature, they call him Saint Gregentius, but when you read the critical studies of it, you find out the word Gregentius is obviously not his real name. He's referred to as the Blessed One. But basically, these stories, you'll see that it all triangulates the inscription, plus the Greek literature, plus the Arabic literature, all talks about a particular individual who was consecrated as a bishop during that time period when Abraham built his church and cathedral. And we find from the Arabic literature that this individual was called Mohammed. All right, so we went through all of this. I'm not going to go through everything. It has it all there on the slides. So you can see in the Greek literature, he was called an apostle, a prophet, and he had a divine book underneath Abraham, and he spread this new religion, built churches and so forth throughout the Arabian Empire. And then we find the same thing going on inside of the Islamic literature as well, where it shows you that this particular Muhammad that was with Abraham had his own religion, was a prophet, and of course was ordained or crowned as a religious figure, and was told to get people to make pilgrimage over to his cathedral. Okay. So yeah, we did all of that. We went through the Archbishop thesis as well. We kind of touched on Nicholas and I's article. I think it's about 40 pages long, which is Muhammad as an episcopal figure. And literally within inside of the Quran, it literally calls Muhammad a bishop, basically. If you know what the word bishop comes from, it's kind of like it's kind of messed up way of saying episcopal, whatever the word is, right? And it basically means it basically means
Episcopal, sorry, that's it.
Yeah, it basically means to like it's a caretaker, to watch over something, basically. Scopus, over, scopus, to watch over. And of course, in the Quran, it calls him a shaheed over the believers. So it's basically the same type of terminology. It goes through the different roles that you find. Muhammad's career kind of changes. Muhammad of the Quran, let me be more specific. Muhammad of the Quran's career changes from the Meccan period to the Medinian period, where he's now this, you could see that he takes on the role of a bishop. And, basically it's all there. I'm not even going to go over it for time. And we gave the conclusion that the Ethiopians, of course, controlled and ruled over Arabia in the 6th century. So, the dates are there. I've got a nice little timeline there for you guys to see it. And then we find out that Abraham converted his state religion from Miaphysitism to Orthodoxy. And Abraham, of course, styled himself as a monarch of the autocephalous Orthodox Church. And then he consecrated the Archbishop of Abyssinia in Marib, the capital city. And as well as, the Archbishop is known as Muhammad in the Islamic accounts, whereas the Archbishop is known as the Blessed One in the Orthodox accounts. And then the Quranic Muhammad literally fits the model of the 6th century Abyssinian Archbishop. The more we learn, even the argumentations that are within inside of the Quran, tritheism arguments, the resurrection arguments, being bodily, and so forth, all these arguments, if once you view it within inside of the lens of a diaphysite Christian of the 6th century, specifically of the Chalcedonian Melkites community, you will understand that it is literally a Christian text. It is definitely a pro-diaphysite text, whilst being an anti-miaphysite or monophysite text as well, and is geared specifically towards converting Jews into, how can I put it, a very low Christological form of Christianity. So that was that, and then of course,
Can we just pause a moment, please? There was a question that says the Kaaba is a church. No, actually, if you go back through the archaeology, there's a guy called Carlton S. Kuhn who wrote about this maybe 70 years ago. And he classes the Kaaba as a megalith, the same kind of structure like Stonehenge. So it was repaired by Ethiopians, and it may well have had some kind of religious significance to the Ethiopians. However, they had their cathedral in Sana'a in Yemen. They, in fact, had a number of churches in the south. And there is the legend in the hadiths where Muhammad sent a team to the south to destroy the Kaabas in Yemen. And there was one specifically that they flattened to the ground because this was a rival Kaaba. So this may well be the cathedral because they needed to, further north, create a blank slate start for Islam. And because the Kaaba is actually oriented on various stars, just like an astrological megalith, much like Stonehenge and other standing stones or other megaliths in England, France, and other places.
Can I jump in?
Comments or thoughts, yeah?
I've read in Edouard Marie Gallet's thesis, 1,000 pages thesis with hundreds and maybe thousands of sources. The accounts of a French Islamologist from the early 20th century who said that the early construction of the Kaaba within the Islamic age, it was made with stones taken from the cathedral of Sana'a. Columns and elements taken from the cathedral that was raised.
Yes, the hadiths even speak of there used to be a picture of green palms, like a river scene, like a very green scene, and it had either a sculpture or a painting of Jesus and Mary.
Yes.
Inside the Kaaba. This is actually recorded as well.
Definitely.
So hold on, between this, I mean, Kalam, what do you think? There's something here that we need to look at again, right? At some point.
100%. So literally, I am going to be discussing that today. So I love that little segue in. And I wish I had prepared. There is a beautiful article by Christian Nurban called Marib, Mecca, the two pilgrimages that took place in pre-Islamic Arabia, something along those lines. I'll try to get up later on for you guys.
Yeah, because what's the city just across the border from Mecca at the very south of Arabia? It was a major Christian pilgrimage site, but was also overrun with heretics.
Yeah, Najran.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Cool. So right now, this is a how can I put it? A presentation that's in progress. I've literally only completed it. I say complete, but I only completed this afternoon, just for you guys, basically. So yeah, hopefully it will flow nicely. So it's called the Apostolic Throne, Marib to Mecca. And over here is just showing you how they basically moved the throne or the cultural center to Mecca, that from Marib, basically. And again, most times I do my presentations and I do stuff. I just wanted to know, like, let everybody know that my type of methodology is this. This is like an academic methodology of looking back into history. I kind of disagree in certain points where I put priority over certain things than normal scholars may do, and we can have a conversation about that in a minute. So over here, I'm quoting from Sean Anthony, Mohammed and the Empires of Faith, page 2, where he outlines his methodology. And he says here, there are 4 cardinal sources upon which all research into the historical Mohammed hinges: the Quran, epigraphic, documentary, and archaeological evidences, contemporary and near contemporary non-Muslim accounts written primarily in Armenian, Greek, and Syriac, and Arabic literary sources that are mostly but not exclusively preserved in the Sirah Maghazi literature and the Hadith compilations. Okay, he says ideally these cardinal sources must be viewed as complementary rather than mutually antagonistic layers of historical evidence. In practice, however, this ideal proves difficult to achieve, and it definitely does, because you cannot marry the Islamic narrative with the archaeology or the contemporary sources, because they definitely do not go. So try to harmonize it. I think that is the wrong approach to do. Personally, I would prioritize, let me know what your guys' thoughts on this. I would prioritize what we can actually find. So, for example, epigraphic documentary and archaeological evidence. That should be number one when we're looking back into history. And then we should, number two, be looking at the contemporary and near contemporary non-Muslim accounts to kind of figure out, to contextualize what was going on. And then I would say number three, then you could start looking at the Quran, because Quran is dated quite early as well. And then lastly, and take it with just a pinch of salt, which would be the Arabic literary sources, because we know that the Arabic literary sources, the Maghazi, Sirah, Hadith literature, all of that is made 300 years later on, and it's just
1,500 kilometers further north. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would take that with a grain of salt, personally. So, so over here, I've just got a nice timeline. I kind of collated the different timelines and put them together just to show you guys. So before, on the last presentation, on the left-hand side, we definitely discussed what took place in the 6th century from 500 to 560 AD. That's literally the last dated archaeology that we've got in the Arabian Peninsula during that time frame, before the so-called rise of Islam. That's the last one. I know that there should be more, and I know that there will be more when we do find it and discover it and the scholars finally release it. But so far, that's as far as we go. And then we've got a gap in the epigraphic, dated epigraphy, up until the year roughly 640 to 642 AD, when we do have a inscription talking about the death of Umar ibn al-Khattab. But then again, we've got the papyruses that talk about the Amir ibn al-Az in Egypt, roughly around 642 as well. So these are all the things I just want to show you guys in terms of the Islamic Empire, what we do know, the inscriptions that we do have. So we have, the early Emirates from 642 to 641. Then we have the Sufyanids, so Muawiyah, Yazid, that took over. And then 680 to 693, we had when the Zubairids actually rule. Then after that, the Marwanids, and basically around 697 to 702, we first find mention of things such as the Masjid al-Haram being built. It doesn't say rebuilt, because some translations will say it's rebuilt. No, it says that this is the year the Masjid al-Haram was actually constructed. And then we have inscriptions roughly around 700 AD in Mecca itself, has Quranic quotes, and then it has the first one in 701 talking about an actual Hajj ritual that took place. So we find that literally the Umayyad period, they started to construct the rudiments of what we know as Islam today.
Right. Question, did you see the question down below? That's an interesting thing, because we spoke of how they can make subtle changes to the Arabic razm, adding a dot, adding a line to make the word switch from one thing to another. And here they can go from Abraha to Abraham, or Ibrahim perhaps, and then say he built the Kaaba. Maybe they had a record that said Abraha built the Kaaba, and maybe in Arabic they can make a small change and make it Ibrahim built the Kaaba.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a feasible idea?
That's possible. Yeah. I would say it's definitely possible. My own personal thoughts, I just think that if you go into St. Catherine's Monastery, is it Monastery Cathedral in the Sinai Peninsula?
Actually, they want to shut it down. The Egyptian government is trying to reclaim it and take everything. So that's disturbing.
Wow. So you can see that they have like little like myths. I think there's somebody that was there during that period. So it was like somebody who is a biblical figure did something in the area, and I think there is a well as well. So personally, I just think that there's a foundation myth that was constructed, and Abraham seems to be the best person to construct that myth around, because obviously we're supposed to be Ishmaelites, so therefore Abraham is our father. So I would think that it would align more to Abraham and them constructing the myth out of that rather than it being from Abraha. But possible, it's still possible.
May I just add a couple of things? Actually, in the Quran, we have something similar with Imran, which I think in the Hebrew is supposed to be Imram, and then they changed that. Plus, they do have problems with how they spelled Abraham, Ibrahim, Ibrahim. It's like they were not really sure. And even Isa to this day is a bit of a mystery because they have a perfectly legit way to say the name. So it wouldn't actually surprise me if they had this memory of Abraham and that becomes Abraham because they start trying to do the whole tradition. And the other thing, when you mentioned about the Kaaba being built in the year 697, that's really cool of that inscription. Note that in the inscription it says the Masjid al-Haram was built in the year 697, but it doesn't mention the city. So we assume because of the location that it is in Mecca, but it's not actually in the inscription. Just putting
But,
that out.
but the hadiths also say that the gap between the construction of the Temple of the Mount or something and Solomon's temple and this are something like 40 years gap.
Well,
Am I thinking of a different?
there is, what's not helping the Muslims, there is no timeline in the entire history of Quran. So you may think that they know what you're talking about. When you go to a guy like Al-Tabari or Ibn Kathir telling us that Jacob built the temple of Solomon and Solomon rebuilt it. Or see, building and rebuilding. Wait a minute, where was Jacob from Solomon? I mean, they have no idea that there may be a couple of years between them, or maybe 4 years. They have no clue. So Abraham built the Kaaba. Yeah, it could be Abraham, whatever you want to say it. Obviously, if you have any literature writings of the Arabic, it's the same guy. And when was Abraham? Well, it was like a couple of years before Muhammad came. It doesn't. There's no timeline. They have no clue what they're talking about.
Because I was thinking, I mean, they speak of the building of the Temple of Solomon in the Hadith. It's a Hadith of Muhammad, and then they speak of 40 years later, either the mosque on the Temple Mount or the Kaaba was built, and you're like, but Solomon's temple is like 900 BC. How do you have the Kaaba or the Temple on the Mount being built 40 years later? You know,
stay on that point because that's a perfect segue onto the next slide as well. And just to the person who actually had that question, although I don't agree, I'm going to give you the counter argument towards me to say this is a counter argument to say this is why you could be right. So, for example, with inside of South Arabian inscriptions, you have something called mimation, which is basically they add an M after a word, basically a word or a name. So, for example, Abraha usually will have an M at the end. Okay, so Abraham. So, for example, with inside of the Greek writings, specifically Procopius, he calls him Abraham with an M at the end. So it's quite possible that, yeah, they could have taken Abraham to be the constructor of the Kaaba and grafted the story on that as well. So just to say that you have got a point and you could be correct.
Can I add my own grain of salt? I'd like also to answer the question. If you look in the Quran, the verse which is talking about supposedly Abraham building the Kaaba, actually he's not building the Kaaba, he's building the temple, is raising the temple from its own foundation. And you will notice that the verb is not, the conjugation of the verb is not in the past tense, but at the present tense. The present tense in Arabic is
even
not.
Even though the same story tells us that he was cleaning the house before he built it. Read a couple of verses earlier, how he can clean the house which was not even built yet.
Yeah. I have hypothesis on this subject. I think those are commandments to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem in present time. So it's not referring to a former construction by Abraham and his son Ishmael. And by the way, you cannot easily change a past tense, yarfa'u in Arabic, to a present tense, rafa in Arabic. It's not easy to do. You have to rewrite everything. It's not a matter of dots and accents. And the same goes with Abraha and Ibrahim. You have to add a letter. You have to add a mim at the end of the word, and it's not easily done. So I don't think the verse and the Quran actually is about Abraha. It's about Ibrahim, the biblical figure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, but then also, how could the Kaaba exist if who was it? Oh my gosh, Abraham's wife Hagar.
Hagar.
If she's running around between the two mountains looking for water, you're like, first, it's the world's oldest city. There's a massive Kaaba. There's a well, which is like 100 meters from the Kaaba, and she's running around, and and the kid's gonna die because there's nothing but empty desert. Then like, but you're like next to the Kaaba with the well. Like, what the hell? It makes literally
here you have to introduce the Jerusalem thesis.
Exactly.
The story of Hagar was made up to give a new interpretation to the Quran mentioning Safa and Marwa. But Safa and Marwa are actually hills in Jerusalem and not boulders in Mecca.
No, of course. And also Hagar is like the equivalent. I mean, if you look at it's also Hajjaj, which is like the Hajj. So there's certain overlaps. Sorry, but back to you, Kalam. But it's just that there's so many little touch points and areas to explore on this,
Definitely. So earlier on, we're talking about you saying about 40 years and so forth, right? And I think that is very this is very pivotal to actually understand the chronology of Muhammad. So right now we have roughly about 80 years from one side. So over here, what took place in the 6th century, and then what took place over here in the 7th century. There is literally an 80-year gap where there is no, dated anything that's dated, basically, and that's where they set the Muhammad narrative. And it says here that Muhammad, born obviously 570, that God commissions the prophet 610, migrated to Medina for 10 years in Medina, and then he died and so forth, right? And we'll find out that all of this is just hogwash, just made up chronology. Okay, so this is a constructed chronology of Muhammad. So inside of the Quran, actually, I'll just read it straight verbatim. In their distress, the traditionalists made use of the phrase in the Quran addressed by Muhammad to the Qurayshites in Mecca, Surah. Earlier, I stayed among you for the space of one Umr. To back the calculation, they decided that the word earlier covered the time between the birth and the vocation of Muhammad, i.e., when he started preaching and so forth. The term Umr correspond exactly to 40 years. Okay, so 40 years was a kind of like a topos that was used to say many years ago. Like if you say 40 years ago, it doesn't mean literally 40 years ago. It just means like a long period of time.
Typically they'll use 70 years or 70 times 7, but 40 is also a magic number in Islam. I mean, Khadija was 40, Muhammad was 40, Ali Baba and the 40 thieves.
Yes.
So it's also a magical number within their version of the Kabbalah.
Actually, in Islam, 40 is the age of maturity. So when you reach 40, that means that is the right. They call it, actually, that's the age where Allah called people to be prophets. When in reality, we know that Isa, son of Mary, did not live to be 40.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So as we can see here, that they're usually literally using numbers symbolically to give a historical account of Muhammad. And then of course they use what's considered to be arithmetical parallelism. So basically Muhammad, after 40 years, he stayed 10 years at Mecca, and then he stayed another 10 years at Medina, giving them equality. So he's not saying one city is better than the other. So it carries on here and says here, in the chronology of the prophet, one can discover everywhere similar methods and the influence of symmetrical figures. For Muhammad's age, the number 60 was once accepted as minimum, and it was broken down as follows: 40 years before the vocation, plus 10 years at Mecca, plus 10 years at Medina. If certain authors pronounce in favor of 13 years at Mecca, they bring in Israfil and Gabriel to establish the symmetry between the 10 years in Mecca and those in Medina, or else they assign again the usual opinion, 13 years to the period at Medina. So you can see that all of this over here, that's talking about the chronology of Muhammad, the lifetime of Muhammad. None of this is backed up by history. None of this can be verified. It's all made up via, symbolic numbers and parallels of symmetry of numerical values, 10 years, and so forth. So it just baffles me that modern day scholars, I speak to a lot of them, and they say we stick with this narrative, although we know that we don't have, it's not historical. They themselves know it's not historical, but they
What they're
need
saying is it's better than being stabbed
yeah.
and losing $2 million of funding a year.
Yeah, I guess. There we go. So I'm like, why? It's just baffling. But again, I understand. Maybe because I do this independently, where of course they're funded and they have to do it and so forth. So, okay, cool. So yeah, last time, of course, we went through this already to show you that Abraha had a monarch, was the monarch of his new autocephalic church. I really would love, if we start to look at the Quran again, and we pick up chapter 30, I believe, which is called Suratul Rum, and it seems as though it's pro-Byzantine, because it says like the believers will rejoice when the Romans are because they've been defeated. They will rejoice when they will come on top again. It's like, why? Ask yourself the question: why is Allah so concerned with the Romans being defeated in a nearby land and them being victorious in the end? And why should Muhammad's community actually be rejoicing over that? Why? I just really want us to like start being more critical. Why is that taking place, especially to my Muslim audience out there? Why was that so important for Allah to put that into the Quran, if you believe in that? Okay, why was that so important? And what is the rest of the Quran about? Talking in chapter 30, why is it going on and on about resurrection? Why is it talking about that? Why does it then proceed to talk about different sects don't break up into different sects? Okay, again, if we place the Quran back within inside of the Abyssinian Arabian context of when Abraham was ruling, and he's letting you know that I am a Rum or Roman Christian, meaning Roman, again, as I said, basically means an Orthodox Christian. We'll look at that again and saying, the Orthodox Christians were defeated, whether it's via council, whether it's via debate, whatever the case is, they've been defeated in the nearby land. Which is that nearby land? Is it Ethiopia, mainland Ethiopia, Africa, or is it towards the north in the Byzantine Empire? Like, where is it? We don't even know, but let's just say, like, hypothesize, like, where could this be? Where have they been defeated? What councils was taking place after the year 548 AD? Well, there was one in 553 AD. There was John of what's his name? John of Philopathus. I can't remember his name from the top of my head, where there was a whole debate around resurrection. Was the resurrection merely spiritual, or was it carnal resurrection? We have the different sects that were broke off previously in 451, where you have the Church of the East, you have the Chalcedonians, and then you have the Oriental Orthodox, which are the Miaphysites. So it fits the context if you translate that not as Romans, but as the Orthodox Christians. And it shows you that the Quran is in line with the Orthodox Christians, because they consider them to be believers and they would rejoice when they would be successful also. So it's very interesting. And it also ties into the fact that the Quran says that Jesus's followers would be superior to the end of time, or whatever the case is. And the Orthodox Christians consider themselves to be in line with that, whereas everybody else is heterodox. So just really putting ourselves, if we really start to look at the Quran in line with the 6th century, it starts to make more sense of what was going on. So just quickly going through that. The Archbishop, we know about the Archbishop, we've spoken about that. So yeah, I thought this was very interesting just to highlight again, because Abraham, of course, he built a throne, he built a cathedral, he did all of those things, and after building this throne and cathedral, he finally crowns Muhammad over here, made him an emir of Mudar, and told him to go out to do dawah, so to speak. Literally, the word in there is actually dawah in the Arabic, and invite people to to his holy cathedral. And I just wanted to make you guys to understand, like, what does it mean to be an apostle? There is like 3 different definitions of an apostle. I'm only going to touch on one of them today, which is when the Quran is constantly talking about Muhammad as an apostle, Muhammad as a Rasul. You have inscriptions talking about Muhammad as a Rasul. Like, let's just break down what that means first, and the implications that it has, and how did the contemporary or the near contemporary non-Muslims actually interpret what these people were saying. So over here, it says here, this is coming from the Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church. In modern usage, the term is sometimes applied to the leaders of the first Christian mission to a country, e.g. to St. Patrick, the Apostle of Ireland, St. Cyril, and so forth, right? These individuals are called apostles. Over here in England, I think it's called St. Augustine, I believe is our saint, who is the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was sent, he was called the Apostle of England, or to the Apostle to the English. And many others were the traditional beliefs of the operation of the grace and authority in the church are maintained. It is through the 12 apostles that this grace and authority are held, descend from Christ, and from them to their lawfully appointed successors. Continuing on, this is to do with the see, the throne, properly the official seat or throne, cathedra of a bishop. This seat, which is the earliest of the bishop's insignia, normally stands in the cathedral of the diocese. Hence, the town or place where the cathedral is located is also itself known as the bishop's see. So back again, I just want to show you that this cathedral, this throne that was built, over here in the inscriptions, it talks about it being built in Marib. And this is where everybody came. So all of the kings of Arabia, well, kings, the rulers of Arabia, princes of Arabia came to greet Abraha and his archbishop. You have the envoys that came in from the Negus in Ethiopia came. The envoys of Rome came to him. You have the Persian envoys. Everybody came to meet this particular archbishop and to meet Abraha himself on the throne. This is the seat. This is where he ruled. Abraha was expanding his territory. So this particular apostle, this particular archbishop was ruling in Marib. Okay, that's where his throne was, and he was ruling the whole of the Arabian Peninsula religiously, where Abraha was ruling in terms of politically as well. I'm just going to skip through this. This is good stuff. Run over the apostolic churches in which the very thrones of the apostles are still preeminent in their places, in which their own authentic writings are read, uttering the voices and representing the face of them severely. And it's from Tertullian. But I'm going to get to the point. The real point is, as I said, how did the non-Muslims engage with the Muslims? Like, what did they say of them? So in the doctrine of Jacobi, it talks about, Muhammad claims that he has the keys to paradise, the keys to heaven. Now, with inside of Christian literature, it's a motif, and it's a motif to say that you have apostolic authority and that you're also a bishop as well, because the 4th century Syriac-speaking aesthetic Afarat refers to Christian bishops as the keepers of the keys. I'm just trying to drone home that when you're hearing Rasulullah, we take it away from the fact that it's actually a Christian statement. It's saying to you that he is the apostle of God. Okay, and he's claiming to have apostolic authority. And then we find again within inside of the Maronite Chronicle, it says here, Muawiyah also did not wear a crown like other kings in the world. He established his throne in Damascus, but did not want to go to Muhammad's throne. So we find out again, that Muhammad had a throne. Most Muslims today will be like, what do you mean Muhammad had a throne? Yeah, Muhammad had a throne. Again, we're talking about not the Muhammad of the Islamic narrative. We're talking about Muhammad of history, had a throne. Okay, and of course that's the cathedral that was in Marib. But why didn't he not want to go? What did he do? Well, in fact, he did go. Well, he sent expeditions down into Marib in the year 660, and this is known as Muawiyah's southern campaigns. So as up in the red, that's where he ruled, and down below, he decided to go to war with these people. Okay, he decided to go to war with these people. And as I keep saying, that this seems to be the first major shift from the original teachings of the early community of the faithful. Like, this seems to be the shift that seems to take place, recorded, where these people, campaign took place and went to war with the original people with inside of Marib.
The dam at Marib is actually mentioned in the Quran, because the dam eventually collapses at one point, and the Quran actually talks about that dam. So it's clearly significant for them to mark it as an important point or piece of geography.
Definitely, exactly. So it marks it, but it doesn't mark Mecca. this Mecca place, which is
Yeah,
not
but
really
it's a piece of
Yeah,
mud.
I was gonna ask you. I don't see on. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, brother. I don't see on the map Mecca or Medina. Where is Mecca? Where is Yasrib?
So they say that it's going to be, it's there, but they didn't do anything in these places. But we do know that they did war with the Nadranis, the Hamadans, Sana, and Marib, which is very interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, later on, so that took place. If you go back in the timeline, you see that we have Muawiyah that ruled from 660 to 680, and then afterwards Yazid ruled as well for 3 years and so forth, right? But you have the counter caliphate. Now this counter caliphate is come from the Zuberids. Okay, now the Zuberids were literally, it's the first time in history that the whole narrative of Muhammad was actually came into existence. That's the first time throughout recorded history that the narrative of Muhammad came about. And how so do you say, Kalam? Well, quoting again, we have the coins dated in 686, and it literally has, in the name of God, Muhammad is the messenger of God. I like to use the word apostle of God. That's the proper translation. The arrows point to where Muhammad appears. It's in Sassanid coinage. It says here, the confession of Muhammad's messengership conveyed on the early coins seem to have played an integral role in Zubair's attempt to bolster the legitimacy of Ibn al-Zubair and his claims to the title of Commander of the Faithful.
Can you just pause right there? You see on that coin, right on the very top of the coin, above his head, you've got like the two wings, and then you've got a crescent and a dot.
Crescent and a star.
Yeah. So yeah, well, I'm just calling it a dot. Let me just share my screen quickly. I just want to bring up something that may or may not be relevant here. Where's my screen? There we go. This I covered in my monotheism series. Let me just share that bigger. Cool. Here we go. Oh bugger! Did I just lose it now? Oh my gosh! Where was it? So sorry. Oh bugger! Now I'm gonna find it. I clicked on the wrong thing. No. It's an entire page with coins on it. I can't miss it unless I.
You had it.
Yeah, if anyone sees it and I miss it, then let me know. It's further
You
down.
had it, and we saw on the coins that there were crescents with a sort of dot.
Yeah, it's probably down here. Oh, bugger. Sorry, my bad. Here we go. Okay, so let me just leave it like it is, so that, because otherwise I'm going to confuse myself here and get lost. This symbol was very much a part of the Babylonian Empire. See here, you see this coin. This is a Persian Sasanian Empire coin. It is effectively identical to the coin that you just showed us. Look at that symbol. It's almost identical, and you've got the crescent and you've got something in the middle, right? Now this one's a star. Sometimes it's the sun or the moon, right? But this symbol goes all the way back to 3000 BC to Abyssinia, to that region of Africa, where it's the symbol for the god Shin, or the Babylonian god, effectively, the sun god, the moon, actually the moon god, right? But notice you see this symbol, but this is just a copy of this Persian Sasanian Empire coin. It's effectively the identical coin. And then what happens is, this is the coin taken from the Yemenis, right? From their culture. And here's the bull's horns, right? And here's that same symbol. And you can trace that symbol throughout Northeast African culture. You can trace it through Yemen. You can trace it through Babylon. It's the same deity in its different regions. But this is, and then also, oddly enough, this is the Venus moon couplet, or it could also be the moon couplet, the sun, and so on. Sorry, but notice their god is called Al-Makkah, right? Known as Makkah. Right, so you got to tie into Makkah, but I mean, just isn't that weird? Odon, I mean, you're the coin guy, but that coin that Kalam just showed, let me just bring up his coin again. It's effectively the same coin. They just repurposed the design.
Pretty much. From my untrained eye, I would say it's pretty much the same coin.
It's pretty much
Obviously,
identical.
in terms of the iconography inside,
Yeah. Well, look at the coins. Look on the right side, the left side, right, and the bottom. There's this moon symbol, sun symbol, whatever. There's the moon and there's the crescent. I'll show mine again, and look here. The same coin. I'm just going to zoom this in a bit.
Yep.
The same coin. 1, 2, 3, 4. You've got exactly the same symbolism on the coin.
Not
effectively
exactly. Not
Close
exactly.
enough. It's minor change.
The crescent on top of the head, it doesn't have a star within it, but something else, a dot, like you said.
Yeah, sure. But you've got the same on the side here.
Yeah, I agree, fully agree.
It's pretty
Fully
close.
agree.
It's almost identical. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
And this is the Sasanian Empire. This is the Persian Sasanian Empire. So very close, and the same symbol repeats all over the place. So I'll go back to Kalam here.
So yeah, they were the first ones to Zubairis were the first ones to put forward this counter discourse against the rivals, the Umayyads, whom they sought to displace. And again, like this is the first time in terms of dated inscriptions. In this case, it's a coin numismatics that we have, you know, the shahada or one form of the shahada, and it's given
Guys,
that
I hate to say I'm leaving you, but I love it. I wish I can cancel my other program and stay with you, but I'm gonna watch the rest of it. Good to meet you, brother. Appreciate you guys. You're doing a good job. God bless you all. God bless you now.
See you soon.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. And again, I know a lot of people always ask me, "Oh, Kalam, why do you always have like, you know, black imagery on the screen?" I'm like, okay, it's not my fault. I'm just literally going into the records, and I'm literally just putting out what their description is. So for example, here, Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, the person that we're discussing right now, part of the Zubairids, was a powerfully built, dark complexioned Adam, tall in nature, light in his beard. This is in Al-Istiyab 1541. So I'm literally just plugging in literally what the description is that we find in places like Tabari and all these different in Ibn Sa'ad and all these different places, and I literally just put it into the AI Mid-Journey and Arab, and it spits it out. And this is what they do. You know, people say, "Why did you make him look like you?" I'm like, bro, this man does not look like me. I'm bald. He has hair. Yeah. So you're just showing you this is like, I'm not making stuff up in terms of like, you know, trying to make these individuals look like black or whatever the case is. This is just how they're described. If you go on further and you look into what the word Adam means, this is how you would usually describe Africans or like very dark-skinned people. So for example, Ali ibn Abi Talib was described as looking Adam, meaning very dark in complexion. Bilal, you have people like, who else? You have Zayd, the son-in-law of Muhammad. You have Usama ibn Zayd, the grandson of Muhammad, was described as Adam. You have Umar described as Adam. You have Uthman as well. So you have all of these different people who started the early you know, Islamic empire. They were described as dark-skinned people. So when you see me bring up these dark-skinned imagery, it's not because I'm trying to make him look that way. It's just that's how they're described in the records, and I just create the imagery from that. Okay, so quickly, so we find out that, you know, he was the first one to create. I would say he started the relocation program. Okay, the relocation. He was the first one to introduce the Muhammad narrative, and then he did something which I call the relocation program, where he brought, earlier on, as you guys were talking about, he brought elements from the from Abraha's cathedral, and he brought it in to so-called Mecca, and you know, constructed the Kaaba out of those ancient materials. Okay, now I'm not going to put, how can I put it? As I said before, my priority in sources, archaeology. I can't find any archaeology to support this, so I don't place this very high. This is something that is written about within inside of the Islamic literature, so it could be true or it could be false. But if it is true, this seems to be the first place where the relocation took place. Relocating, you know, the materials from Marib Church or from the Sana Church and from Abraha, and bringing it into the Central Arabian environment to create and construct the Kaaba of Mecca. What's very interesting, because this particular over here on the right, you have the image of Jesus and Mary. This is found in the Sana Museum as well. So it supposedly was part of the Sana Cathedral. So we have this imagery of Jesus and Mary. But what's very interesting, again, when we go back into Al-Zarqi, he talks about that, people are given accounts that they've heard. Let me just read out. I have heard that there was set up in El Bayt, the Kaaba, a picture of Miriam and Isa. Atta said, yes, there was set in it a picture of Miriam adorned. In her lap, her son Isa sat adorned.
Mm.
So during this time period, during the Zubairid time period, this imagery of Jesus and Mary was inside of the Kaaba. There is other narratives. I like this narrative because at least that is historical, because you can say, yeah, there was a person that was there that gives a historical account of what they saw, etc., etc. But we have the Hadith literature that talks about, Muhammad conquering Mecca, and it's decided to destroy everything, all the artwork inside of Mecca, but he covered it and said, destroy, wipe away everything here except from this image of Jesus and Mary. And it's very I just wish that the Umayyads didn't bombard the Kaaba and didn't burn it down. And the reason being is because Muslims would be a bit more nicer to Christians, because the rebuttal to them is whenever you're going to say something bad, just remember who's the central figure inside of your Kaaba. Just remember who you're praying to every single, or praying in the direction of every single day, 5 days of the 5 times a day. You're literally praying towards the Kaaba that has the only imagery in there is Jesus and Mary. And I wish, and I'm praying that my Muslim audience right now, if you're in right now, please reinstate the Sunnah of your Prophet and put back in every mosque an image of Jesus and Mary.
Well, Ted Bird says here, Abraha, he's Ethiopian, he says, is a short form of Abraham in Ge'ez, or hopefully I pronounced that halfway decently, which would be interesting. Can I show something as well? Let me share my, just to add to the mix here, this is very interesting. There's my screen. Just bring this up. This is from Sciences Magazine, May, June 1982. So we need to look into this Ted Bird comment as well at some point. Thank you for that, Ted. So a study was done of the Kaaba many, many years ago. This goes way back to the 60s and before, right? Where astronomers and other archaeologists did some, and they say the major axis of the Kaaba is aligned to the rising of Canopus at about the 1st century. It is precisely aligned towards the southernmost setting position of the moon at the winter solstice. So it's more accurately aligned to the moon than to Canopus, but it's roughly aligned to Canopus. Roughly every 19 years, that number, the crescent moon sets at the spot on the horizon visible along the southeast side of the Kaaba. This lunar alignment is found in many megalithic sites in Europe. And it says the Kaaba might even have features in common with the Great Stone Circle on Salisbury Plain, right? And they speak of gods that were worshipped there, the sun, the moon, Venus, even Canopus. And in the early part of the 7th century, the walls were built up, probably in alternate layers of stone and wood, like the churches in Ethiopia, right? So I'm just trying to be very brief about this. It's a primitive observatory, a weather vane, and appointed to God. And it seems that the Kaaba was a microcosm of the celestial and terrestrial universe of the pagan Arabs. The sun, the moon, Canopus, the brightest star in the sky, and one of the walls faces towards particular winds as well. They have astronomical and meteorological phenomena were intimately connected, right? And so they speak of the Arabs also, Canopus was very important to the Arabs as part of their navigation system. And the door in the Kaaba faces the summer sunrise. You have Canopus, and so the lunar alignment they speak of. So on all of this, so what you have is you've got what seems like an Arab megalithic structure, which was an astronomical observatory, or at least allowed them to plan for floods or seasons or planting or whatever the heck it was. But it's a megalith, like a little calendar. and it was repurposed into some kind of religious structure, which was seemingly Christian Ethiopian and then eventually became Islamic. So it pre-exists Islam, and it seems to be very much aligned with astronomical religious worship from pre-Islam, and it's definitely also linked to Yemen. So just thoughts of that.
Yeah.
May I just jump in very briefly about this, this thing that you read earlier? So in Mecca, there is this place, this museum called the Two Mosque Foundation, I think it is. They're supposed to have some of the oldest stuff. Is where they have the footprints of Ibrahim, which of course we know they are much later, and one of the fake Qurans of Uthman, these sort of things. They also have like the oldest things that are meant to be about the Kaaba. I think it's like 2 or maybe 3 columns. I remember seeing that they have one that is like made of wood, like good luck actually trying to pin that to the Kaaba, but they say it is from the original Kaaba, and then I think 1 or 2 more made out of a stone. So I find it odd that if you go to that, you can debunk everything else at the show, but then they have some columns which you cannot debunk. And now you have just read that this guy Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr actually used some columns, so maybe there is a connection there, and they are the original ones which they may have taken from Yemen.
Yeah, definitely. There is a good. There's several articles on this as well. GRD King has written a good article. I think it's the pre-Islamic paintings in the Kaaba, and it goes through a lot of information in there. It definitely shows that there is an Ethiopian connection to that as well. There's another article as well. It talks about the architect Bakum, who came there. He was supposedly of the Byzantine, from Byzantine, but he was of Ethiopian heritage, and he was the one. If you read the Syrian literature, he was the one 5 years before Muhammad's call to being a prophet. He was the one who actually brought the Byzantine materials, columns and wood and etc., to build the Kaaba, which is very interesting. Very interesting, because it just seems to me it's just a retelling of the story of Abraha, because Abraha literally has the same narrative where he calls for the king of the Byzantine to send over an architect over to bring materials to build up the cathedral. So it's very interesting that there's some parallels there. But I'm not even going to go into too much details. I'm just saying, going to point you to the direction of GRD King's pre-Islamic paintings in Arabia, in the Kaaba, and has some great information in that.
Can I jump in also?
Yeah.
I found it very, very hard to believe that there could have been something in Mecca before the Islamic time. There were no pagan Arabs during the times of Muhammad. And I don't think there was a Kaaba in Mecca as well.
Could be Yemen.
Yeah, it might have been elsewhere. But what I found very interesting...
But when they rebuilt it, they modeled it after existing structures.
Yeah, exactly. What I found very interesting here at this stage of the presentation is that we see a sort of conflict between an Ethiopian or a Southern Arabic narrative centered around maybe the moon god, the crescent, and so on, and the Umayyad narrative. And they might have had different opinions about the Muhammad Rasulullah formula. Maybe in Southern Arabia, it referred to the bishop, the historical figure of the bishop. But for Abd al-Malik, I'm very convinced that the formula was understood as blessed be or desired be the apostle of God, and that Abd al-Malik portrayed himself as such an apostle. He claimed to be the first deputy of God on earth, Khalifat Allah fil ard. The question is, did Abd al-Zubayr think of himself as an apostle of God, or just or did he put forth the motto, the formula, just as a reverence to the Mohammed Bishop?
Yeah.
So
It's
claiming to be a sort of successor of this Mohammed Bishop.
yes, that's where it seems to go. So literally over here, the Zubairid propaganda, it seems as though that he's definitely speaking about somebody else that he is related to. So he's actually claiming that he's related to them because he, of course, is a Zubair, Ibn Abdullah Zubair. Zubair was actually was called a Hawari, which is another Ethiopian word which means disciple. He was a disciple of Muhammad, and his father was called Awam. Um, Awam was actually the brother of Khadija. So Khadija's brother, son, Zubair, which where the Zubairid name comes from. So they're claiming their lineage from that. And again, Waraka was part of that same family. That was the cousin of Khadija. So their whole narrative, you'll start to see that their narrative is just literally, I'm telling you about my family lineage and our connection to Muhammad and how I should be the one who's the Amir al-Mu'minun. So over here, if you know the very first story, this is the very first. Historians have come to the conclusion that this is the very first story from the very first storyteller and the most famous storyteller in the Meccan region. And it's not, they've all said it's not historical, but at least we know this is the earliest narrative that we have and seems to be legit. And it says here, the telling of the story of Muhammad's initial call to prophecy, i.e. the Iqra narrative, came from this preacher or this curse called Ubayd ibn Umair al-Laythi at the Meccan court of the so-called counter-caliph Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, the brother of Ura ibn al-Zubair, who is Zori. See, these are some famous names, Zori and Ura ibn al-Zubair. The frame story is one of the most remarkable features of Ibn Ishaq's version of the Iqra narrative, and it has played a large role in the rationale articulated by modern historians for favoring its chronological priority to the tradition of al-Zori. So if you know anything about this, this is roughly set in the period of 680 to 692, and the Iqra narrative is the whole story of, Muhammad went to the mountains and, into the cave and, some figure, later on it got changed into the angel Gabriel, but before it was like a figure that came to him and said Ikra bismi rabbika, and the first lines of the Quran was supposedly revealed, and then afterwards, like, he didn't know what was going on and he was in the mountains, and then he saw this figure sitting upon a throne suspended between heaven and earth, and it said, Ya Muhammad, you are the Rasulullah, you are the apostle of God, and so forth. And he rushes back home to Khadija or goes to Waraka, depending on, there's various divergence of the story. And then Waraka, now says, I'm going to read down below. And when she related to him what the apostle of God told her and what he had seen and heard, Waraka cried, Kiddus, Kiddus, Kiddus. I'm going to say it in the Ethiopic, or Kadus, Kadus, Kadus in Arabic, which is holy, 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 or Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus within the Latin.
And in Hebrew as well, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh.
There we go. Yeah. So this is like a very famous line in the liturgy, a very famous line inside the Christian liturgy, instead of actually bringing a bishop, like when you appoint a bishop and you do the liturgy, that is like the climax when they say holy, 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 and they put him in and they enthrone him and so forth, and we'll figure out. Let me just read it anyway. Verily, by him in whose hands is Waraka's soul, if thou hast spoken to me the truth, O Khadija, there hath come to him the greatest nomos, who came to Moses aforetime, and lo, he is the prophet of his people, bid him of good heart. So if you know anything about Waraka ibn Naful, he is supposed to be a Hanafi. He was a Christian, the most learned Christian out of all of them, and so forth. And this is when Paul, this is the journey to Damascus moment. I can't remember what it's called. When Paul, has his vision and so forth, and then he has to go to somebody, and this is his witness that confirms, yeah, this you definitely saw it from the Lord. So this is the same type of narrative to prove the point that Muhammad definitely is the apostle of God. And it's only the learned few would actually understand what this means, because a lot of scholars, they're arguing, or they're like, what, why, Namuz, they don't know what it means. And today I'm just going to break down to you what it means. It means he saw, dun, 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 over here. This is a nice article in the Study Theologicum. This is completely unrelated to Islam, full stop. And it says here, nomos as a medium of revelation, paralleling logos in anti-Nicene Christianity. Okay. And they do a beautiful thing here where it says, in the beginning was the law, and the law was with God, and the law was God, and the law became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth, and so forth, right? It says here, what if there had been in the New Testament such a statement identifying Jesus Nazareth with the eternal Lord, nomos, as there is John 1:14? It says here, identifying him with the eternal word logos. The idea is not as remote as it may appear at first glance, because there are passages in the post-biblical literature of the early church where Jesus Christ is in fact identified with the nomos. Okay, and it shows you with inside of anti-Nicene church fathers, they definitely use the appellation towards Jesus or towards the logos as being the nomos. A good article. If you have time, read it. Very good stuff. So, what it says here, it says
the nomos is, it says here, it's part of mythology, the spirit of the law in Greek mythology.
Mhm.
And then also you think of the Arabic word namaz, which is getting ready for prayer, which is taken from Persian, which is very similar.
But what's very interesting is that Waraka, being a Christian, he chooses to use a Greek word, okay, to call him, it's the nomos, okay, and that is very telling as to what he may be upon, like in terms of, like, we know that he is of Ethiopian ancestry, but we know a lot of them actually was of Ethiopian ancestry. I believe what's the name, Khadija's cousin, Uthman. There was another one called Uthman who was supposed to, during the time of Muhammad, was to align with the Byzantine king and to become the king of Mecca and preach Christianity and so forth. We find out that he is also numbered as a child of the Habashi and so forth. So we know that there is a very much so strong Christian connection with that family and a very strong Ethiopian connection with that family. We even find out that Zubair was the one who swam across the rivers in Ethiopia to find out who won the war between the Negus and the revolt and all them things. There's a strong Abyssinian connection between these individuals. But it's very interesting that he was putting forward the narrative that for those who know, in the Quran, I believe it's chapter to do with the Najm, where supposedly, because there's the new narrative of it's the angel Gabriel speaking to Muhammad and calls Muhammad his servant. And this has perplexed people because there is one narrative to say, no, how could he see God? It's impossible that he saw God. But say no, he saw him the distance from here to the lottery or whatever the case is. It's like, no, the theologians were arguing it couldn't have been God that he saw. He must have saw the angel Gabriel, and it's the angel Gabriel who's referred to, calling him his servant. But then they're arguing and say, how can an angel call a human a servant? It's only God could be a servant, not knowing that this visitant on the throne that's in the heavens. If you asked any learned individual, like, who is the person that sits on a throne in heaven, they'll tell you it's either God or the second of God, which is Metatron within side of Judaic literature, or is Jesus within side of Christian literature. That is the person who sits on the throne, and that's the person who called to Muhammad and called him his slave or his servant. So it's very interesting stuff once you kind of break into, kind of figure out what was going on inside of Sean Anthony's Muhammad and the Empires of Faith as well. He gives a beautiful correlation and connection to show that within inside of the 7th century, this famous Iqra narrative of read or sing is well known throughout late antiquity, because the very same storyline within inside of Caedmon, which is in England, has the same stuff. It's like sing. Oh, I can't. What do you mean? I can't read or I can't sing. Like, and then the angel or the visitant is keep telling them 3 times over to do it, and then finally he starts speaking in the language, the vulgar language, so the English language instead of the liturgical language, and started making up songs and praising the creator for his creation and so forth. So basically, the same. If you like if you put them line for line next to each other, you'd be like, hold on, the Ikra narrative and Caedmon's narrative, like line for line, is exactly the same. And it's not that they're copying one from each other, okay? Because even though they're both supposedly in the 7th century, so Caedmon's in the 7th century, and then the Ikra narrative is in the 7th century, but they're like I don't even know how many miles away, like 60,000 miles away, whatever the case is, that they're very far distance away from each other. So they couldn't possibly be, copying from each other. But it's the fact that it's part of the late antique trope amongst Christians to put forward a similar narrative. And they're just coming from the same source, basically. So it's very, very interesting. I would definitely say a book to buy for everybody out there is Sean Anthony's Mohammed and the Empires of Faith, and he really goes
You're
through everything.
getting the lost technology from Flying Carpet Airways, because how did Abraham get all the way from Beersheba in Israel all the way down to Mecca to visit his son and go back the same day? So there's lost ancient technology in Mecca that we need to,
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny.
Ancient
So
Aliens is going to do an episode on this pretty soon, I'm telling you.
they definitely will. And then again, in terms of like the Jerusalem connection, because there is, I think let me just finish.
Just before the Jerusalem connection, can I ask you, Kalam, why do you think that Waraka bin Naufal was Abyssinian?
Okay, so I would say that the reason why I would say that Waraka ibn Naufal is Abyssinian is because there's several things to pile up. If you read inside of the Syriac literature, especially the Chinese, there's a Chinese version as well and other versions. It talks about that Waraka was a courtier. Okay, he was a courtier, so he would be part of some type of king's court. It doesn't state which king's court he was a courtier of, so he puts forward that argument. But then when you read also,
what are the sources exactly?
This is the Shengfang something.
I never knew that Waraka was to be found outside of Islamic sources.
Oh no, it's all in Islamic sources. It's an Islamic. The Chinese, they converted it to Islam supposedly on the
okay,
and so forth, but it's in that Islamic source to say that Waraka.
There's something about Waraka bin Naufal. First of all, his name bin Naufal is a son of the parchment, son of the folio, son of the paper, we would say today. It's a very strange name, and besides, he's said to be a Nazarene, not a Christian. Nazarenes are Jews. He's said to be a Jew who converted to Nazarenism. A Jew. He is originally he's a Jew. He's said to be a Jew, so I don't think he could have been an Abyssinian.
So I would say Abyssinians were Jews as well. Abyssinians were Jews.
Sort of. But
can I just show something? I mean, if you look at this, obviously comes from an Islamic source as well. Waraka. Now the K, the hard K, is the Central Arabian pronunciation, whereas if you look at Yemen, they often had a softer qa. So this is ka versus qa, right? But warak, that's another word we can look at, because his name is also made up of some interesting words that have interesting backgrounds and histories. But it says biographical details are few in number and legendary in character, right? They all relate to his role in basically spreading Muhammad's revelation. He's supposed to be the son of Naufal bin Asad. That's very Syrian, right? Asad bin Abdul Uzza, which now again you get to the goddess Al Uzza bin Qusay. Now that's interesting, but you've got Al Uzza, you've got So, and he said to have been killed in the last battle of the sacrilege, and he was the cousin of the Prophet's first wife, Khadija. But it's just there's not a lot known about him. But notice when you speak of some of the ancient Arabic gods, right? Like if you ask the Qataris, like, where do you get the name of your country? They'll say nobody knows. It's a complete secret. Good grief. We think it may have something to do with water, right? But if you look at the only reference to Qatar in Arabic history, it's Qatar, right? Which is Qatar is a fawal form from Qatara, of which other examples like Naufal. So it's related to this, but then you also get Qatar wa Hasis, which is a god, a maker god, a second tier god, who made weapons for the main gods. So the word Qatar clearly comes from pre-Arabian gods, right? But then the word Naufal is connected to that as well. So there's, so you get Qatara, Qautar, Naufal. I don't know. It's just there's little odd connections to paganism as well. So it's really hard to figure out. It's a bit of a mess, But Qautar also is a spring in paradise, but then that comes from the Persian narrative again. So there's all of these odd threads that it's not very easy to connect. So which one do you pull on? Which one do you weight as more important? And how do you stack them chronologically? These are questions to be had.
Definitely. So just to quickly finish off to do with Waraka. So we find that he's a courtier, and then we also find that in Ibn Kathir's literature that him and the Negus would meet up and discuss what was taking place inside of Mecca, and discussing the birth of Mohammed, etc., etc. So we can see that in one source, Sirah source, it says that he's a courtier. In the next source, you find that he is actually engaging in court discussions with the Abyssinian king. So we have that connection there to say that okay, he could be part of the that structure and so forth. Then we find out inside of there is a great article called "The Cousins of Khadija," and in there it talks about the Abyssinian heritage that they have. In there, there's a certain book called the children Nasab, the children of Habashi, basically, and certain individuals in their ancestry is stated to come from Abyssinia as well. We also find even the word Abdul. You brought up the name Abdul Uzza. Uzza, when you find out as well, you go into, I think it's the Kitab al-Asnab. It's to do with Ibn Kalbi. Ibn Kalbi talking about the different idols. I'm not going to say this is historical or this is true and so forth, but they describe Uzza as being an Ethiopian woman, as an Ethiopian deity itself as well. So we can see that there is some type of affiliation with Ethiopia somehow.
But then if you look, you remember the Yemenis were the dominant culture since 800 BC, or maybe even sooner, maybe as far back as 1000 BC. The Yemenis were the Ethiopian dominant culture. They took over East Africa, like Ethiopia, that region, right? And those countries around there, above and below Ethiopia. But then eventually they waned, and the Ethiopians then took over Yemen. And there's some theories as well. There's actually one theory that if you look at Babylon, right? Babylon worships the moon god and so on, right? The moon god Shin, right? But there's one theory that says that actually the culture of the Babylonians was actually imported from the Yemenis. The Yemenis actually went up north and established that religion there, not the other way around.
Yeah, that's interesting because
because if you look at the Babylonian pantheon, the Yemeni pantheon, and the early Ethiopian pantheon before they were Christianized, these are the very same gods. They have different names, maybe slightly different characteristics, but it's literally the same pantheon. It's the same chief god, the same structure. So they have different names, but it's actually the same pantheon. It doesn't differ. And it's interesting that it's not different gods or different pantheons. It's the same pantheon, just in local names.
And lastly,
just the thing about another thing about Waraka. I have a study on the character within the Islamic tradition that was made by Joseph Hazi. I have the French version of it. It's a Lebanese priest, which is called the Priest and the Prophet. Really, it's a very thorough study, deep dive into the Islamic tradition. And it makes a very strong case for Waraka having been a Nazarene Jew, an Ebionite, and there's nothing about Abyssinia or Ethiopia. I find it a bit far-fetched, to be frank with you. It might make sense because as a Jew, he could write and speak Hebrew, Aramaic, and so on, and so he could have been the courtier that you described. But in the end, I think he's much more closer to an Ebionite or Nazarene background than an Ethiopian one.
Is it possible to? Is it in English? The article? Or?
Yeah, it's not an article. It's a book.
Oh, it's a book. Oh, cool.
It's a book. Yeah, and there is an English version, an English translation. I know it exists on Amazon. The good friend Mel. Hello, Mel.
Yeah, Mel, do you want to join us online? I can drop the link. You're welcome to jump in.
Yeah.
Before we move on from the Nomos section, I would like to just mention something, but I'll let you carry on first.
Yeah. So just to conclude my point on Waraka, I don't think he's an historical character at all.
No.
It's a sort of reminiscence of the influence of Ebionism and Nazarenism on the very early Muslims, or pseudo or so-called Muslims, and because it is it's a contradiction within the Islamic narrative. There are several hadiths that are very, very odd about him. Like, for example, that the revelation halted or stopped when Waraka died, or that Waraka was a sort of bridge between the Arab milieu and the Jewish milieu, because it is said that he could translate the scriptures from Aramaic and Hebrew into Arabic.
Yeah.
From Hebrew into Arabic, then what if he was... I mean, look, they could have made a composite man again, like they did with Mohammed, but then maybe he was a Karaite Jew, because they were doing the translation from Hebrew into Arabic.
In 640, we have the testimony of a disputatio, maybe it's 641, between the emir of Damas and the patriarch, the Christian patriarch of Damas. And the emir of Damas has with him a Jew who explains the scriptures to him. A bit like Waraka might have been for the historical Muhammad.
Yeah, but that's not to say anyone
in Christian literature. It's not an Islamic source.
No, but look, it's not to say I think anyone is wrong, because everyone's got evidence, and the evidence is all over the place. The aim is to put it all on the table and then start looking at it and seeing what's authentic, what looks edited, what looks fabricated. You know, what connects to what sense can we make of it compared to history and stuff like that, you know?
Definitely. And that's why, as I said, you know, the literary source in terms of the Arabic Muslim sources is, like, as I said, I placed that number 4. Like, that is right at the bottom, because we can't prove, unless we find something that's archaeological or you know, somebody else outside of the Muslim world is speaking on it. It's like we can't verify it. It's just, you know, the Islamic sources are saying this, but it's like we can't really verify any of that information. But it seems as though that Waraka was a pivotal character, you know, within the early narrative of the Muslim, the Muhammad narrative. And
so maybe he wrote the first myth, taking all these sources and constructed the myth on top of them. And I mean, like with Monic burning, obviously they had to burn all the history that came before, because they're starting blank. They had to destroy the history and start fresh with a whole new set of myths. built
Yeah.
on top of a known cultural and historical landscape that was familiar to people, but they edited everything, altered the definitions, changed the names, fixed the dates, whatever they did.
Yeah. Because
So that,
I wouldn't say that Waraka would have made this up. I would say that this is all made up with inside of the Zubayrid period. So the Zubayrid, they're creating these narratives inside of his court. He's publicizing it. People are coming in supposedly to do pilgrimage. He's speaking negatively against the Umayyads, and he's teaching certain things. So I would say it's his propaganda that he is constructed, and he's constructed his narrative around his own family. So, for example, now whether this is true or false, because I don't know if this is true or false. The Muhammad character is married to his auntie. The Muhammad character is, was being taught by his uncle. So it's really just bolstering me up to say, like, look at my family. My family has a claim towards Muhammad, not only because my auntie was the wife of Muhammad, but my uncle actually was the one who educated Muhammad and brought him into the community, and so forth, so forth. So I don't know how true this is. It just shows that it's used for some form of political gain. It's to bolster up my status, to make it look like I am somebody who's important, and so forth. So I don't know how true these stories really are, because we can't really verify it. It seems though that for me, it would be more plausible that it is of Abyssinian connection. I'm not saying that specifically they need to be Abyssinian in terms of like ancestry, but in terms of the culture of Abyssinia, in terms of being of Abyssinian Christianity. Because if we look on the Arabian Peninsula, really and truly, we have inscriptions in Ge'ez of the books of Psalms. We have inscriptions that has like Psalms quoted, Isaiah quoted, different prophets quoted. Like, we have these inscriptions to know that when Caleb and the rest of the Ethiopians spread their Christianity, the liturgy took place with inside of the Ge'ez language. That was the language of the liturgy. So to me, it just seems more plausible that these people had the Abyssinian connection versus anything else. And I could be wrong, but there's nothing to really substantiate it, apart from the fact that we have these inscriptions to know that this was the language that was pushed forward as part of the empiric religion. But apart from anything else, it's like the literature. I don't know. I can't really tell just from the literature alone if these people truly existed.
Okay,
Yeah.
if I may, on the previous slide, and there were just a couple of things. First, that nomos, yes, you're right about what it means. It also means those who don't believe that Muhammad existed. So just putting it out there. And the you said about this story that it is supposed to be Jesus basically appearing to in the cave of Hira. Actually, there was a comment here from You Can Do It Too, saying if Waraka was Jew or Christian, he would know it is not written that Gabriel ever came to Moses. Actually, that story that you mentioned, it never mentions Gabriel. So you're absolutely right. In fact, the Hadith says the truth came to to Muhammad, and then it says, and then the angel appeared and choked him a few times, and then when he goes to Waraka, Waraka says, "Oh, this must be the same angel that appeared to Moses," and of course. Later they say, well, that's Gabriel, but this was a Judeo-Christian um, culture. So if somebody used that example, the same angel that appeared to Moses, they would have thought, okay, that's Jesus. Basically, like he appeared as well, pre-incarnation, basically. So everything in that hadith has nothing, it doesn't say Gabriel, so that is created later, which makes me think hadiths have a lot of information, but not truth. It's almost like if we really read between the lines, we might actually see a pre-Islamic story that was starting to be fabricated, and they were already telling the story about this guy who was visited by Jesus, but but not the full story, and that makes it into the full story much later on. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because everything else in that hadith, it doesn't mention Gabriel, and it says things like the truth came upon Muhammad. So it's like, yeah, these people were talking about Jesus.
There you go. That's it. Exactly that. So for me, I'm always thinking, what is the purpose of the story? And clearly, the purpose of the story is to give witness and authentication, and to who is it trying to deliver that to? From the time I say the truth came, I already know that the only person who is the truth, the way, and the life is Jesus. So what the truth? Jesus came to Muhammad. If I'm a Christian living in that time, is that what it means? Oh, and it was the nomos. I know who the nomos is. Jesus says, "I am the law of Moses." Jesus was the one who came as the logos in the burning bush towards Moses and so forth. So, like, as a Christian who understood the scripture, it gave credence to the Muhammad narrative as being the apostle, because as I said before, there is different ways of becoming an apostle. So if you read back, there is either being a disciple of Jesus, being part of the 12, therefore you were sent out so you could be an apostle. Nobody's alive today that's part of the 12, so you can't be apostle that way. There's a second way, which is the election way, where the college of bishops or the community of apostles come together and they choose this person to be that. And then we find again inside of the Kaaba narrative, you have somebody, you have Pakum. Bakum is a very famous name. Pakum is a very famous name in terms of monastery inside of Egypt, southern Egypt, and so forth. He sets up monasteries all over. All monasteries today is based upon Pakumis, and he has the same narrative of an angel writing laws down and so forth. But that's besides the point. You find that Muhammad is now elected as being the most, he should put the final piece into play in terms of the black stone and so forth. So you can see that they're trying to incorporate things of Christianity in there, the election narrative. Then another way is how Paul became an apostle as well, is by having an encounter with the resurrected Christ, and the resurrected Christ giving him his mission and sending him forward. So they try to authenticate Muhammad as being a prophet or an apostle, just like Paul, to say that he had this encounter. He saw, the resurrected Christ Jesus sat upon the throne, and he is the nomos. He gave him this mission. He confirmed. He says that you are the apostle. Now go forward and warn the people. Arise and warn, and blah blah blah. There's like a whole length towards the whole narrative as well. So you can see that the whole purpose of creating it is just to say, yes, we're authenticating that he was an apostle. Listen, Waraka, if he truly did exist in your day and time, we all know that Waraka was, the most learned Christian amongst all of us. We can argue and say if he was a Christian or wasn't a Christian, he was the most learned. Nazarene.
Use the word
Nazarene. He was the most learned Nazarene amongst all of us. So if he says that Muhammad was an apostle and he would support Muhammad and back him, then who are you as a community? You guys should be behind him. If you was behind Waraka, then so should you be behind Muhammad. So to me, that's what the story is trying to get across. How true or false that is, Allahu Alam. Yeah, nobody knows. Because we can't tell. There's nothing to verify this at all except from the Islamic narrative.
Yeah, and just to add a little complexity, there's another way to be an apostle, a Rasulullah. It's by pretending to be Jesus' second coming, like Ali claimed to be in the Shiite sources, or maybe Abdul Malik. I don't know. You see, and everything kinds of mixes and blends together.
That's another way as well. Sorry, forgive me, because the apostle par excellence is, of course, Jesus with inside of, I think is it Hebrews? It talks about him being the apostle, and every other apostle is basically sent. Every apostle, Jesus said, "I will send out prophets and etc., and learned men and scribes, etc." So Jesus is the prophet, the apostle par excellence. Just to finish off the presentation, over here is the last slide, and again we have over here the Abdul Malik Reformation, and it says here that let's see, beyond the relentlessness with which Abdul Malik pursued the defeat of the Zubayrids, culminating in the shocking siege of Mecca by his general Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf in 692, I thought it was 693, but yeah, he responds to the Zuberi challenge with ever more ambitious projects and reforms to bluster his legitimacy, which he continued to pursue even long after Ibn al-Zubayr's defeat, such as building the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, reforming and Islamizing the empire's coinage, reforming its script, and recompiling the Quran and Arabizing the administrative bureaucracy. These initiatives redounded to Umayyad legitimacy and profoundly shaped the trajectory of early Islam, bequeathing to the religion not merely the first icons of its imperial power, but also the earliest symbol of Islamic identity itself. And over here on the left is an imagery of, I believe this is maybe, is it in Taif? I can't remember exactly where this is, but this is the inscription over here to show that the Masjid al-Haram was constructed in the year 697, or in the Arabic 78, 8th year. Okay, so we can see that prior to this time, there is no archaeological. See, again, my priority list of sources to tell me history is archaeology. So prior to this, we don't have anything. 697 is the first time we hear something to do with the Masjid al-Haram. And then later on, I believe, let me just quickly go back over here. And then later on in 699, Mecca now has his first, or 700 AD, 699 to 700 AD, Mecca has its first inscriptions. And then by 701 or 702, we now see signs of the Hajj ritual taking place, and then loads of inscriptions take place to do with Quranic material. Prior to that, prior to the 700s, there was nothing to let us know that a Kaaba or Masjid al-Haram even existed in that area, and there was no Hajj or pilgrimages taking place prior to that period. But after Abdul Malik, who is really the true author of what we know Islam today is, he was that author. He was the one who kind of brought everything together, compiled or recompiled the Quran, distributed it. He literally took the Zubayrid blueprints, Abdullah Zubair's blueprint, beefed it up, put it on steroids, changed a few details here and there to make himself look good, and create a whole empire out of this particular Saint Muhammad. And that's the way I see it. Finished.
Bravo.
Okay. Phenomenal. So that inscription, I think I heard from things Jay Smith said that it's now been blown up, so it's not there anymore. But we have the picture. So if that's the case, well, we have it. But I found it curious that it says very clearly that it is when the Masjid al-Haram was built, and in the Islamic Awareness website, they write all of that. Is when it was, refurbished, because Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr had this fight, and that's just not in there. But one thing of note is that it doesn't say Mecca, so we can still give it to Abdul Malik. So he creates now the Masjid al-Haram and the Masjid al-Aqsa, or at least starts building it. So everything is pointing at him, but there is nothing else from before. Now that I mentioned the Islamic Awareness website as well, there is, I think Patricia Cron said that the first inscription that mentions Islam is in the 8th century. And in the Islamic Awareness website, they have one inscription that they say, oh, well, Patricia Cron ignored this one. There is an inscription from, I think, 680 or something like that. And they say, well, it says Islam. It's like, I've unpacked that one on my channel. I've zoomed in as much as possible. It doesn't say Islam. So it's kind of like curious. You go through the Islamic Awareness website, and if there is something that completely debunks this revisionist view of Islam, is like, they're probably lying. Don't take what they are saying. Look at the actual source, because there are cases where they are doing these nasty tricks.
Definitely. 100. All right. I'm here for another 10 minutes. So let me know, family, in the comment section. Is there any questions, comments, and anything where you want us to point us to, areas of research that we should get into? Because I'm not claiming that I know everything. This is just my research that I found, definitely in regards to Mecca and, how it developed and how it came into being, the Kaaba, how it came into being. I actually rewatched one of your videos, JC. I think you had somebody else on talking about the use of Mecca in the Quran. And I remember I had done studies on this like years ago, and I was like, "Yep, that's exactly what happened there. That doesn't mean the place Mecca at all, etc., etc." So it's like very good content. I'm really loving the fact that I can actually be on the panel with you guys, learn things, go back, look at your old videos, look at Lloyd's videos, come on here, see the great Odon Lafontaine talking some good stuff, challenging. So I can't wait. If I can find that book in English, I'm going back, finding that book in English, and making that purchase on Amazon.
No, I mean there's room to build on this, because clearly they took, if you just look at the language from that angle, they took a lot of stuff from Christianity, from what looks like Syriac Christianity. Then they took stuff from Ethiopia, clearly, and they had to somehow combine the two, along with the geography where they had to start fresh in Arabia. But they were sandwiched between the Syrian aspect and the Yemeni Ethiopic aspect, and they started clean in the middle, and they had to somehow take existing ideas and construct a new myth. Welcome, Mel.
Welcome, guys. As luck would have it, my other half decided to ring me just when I was about to join you. So,
okay, and we're just about to wind down. We're here for another 10 minutes, then Kalam is to go. Then what did you think so far? What have you seen, Mel? Any thoughts?
I've only literally just caught the tail end, so I didn't really get to see it properly. But I just saw you, and I thought I'd just make a comment in there. But I'll have to replay. But
yeah, from roughly minute 11 to minute 20, there's a really good summation that Kalam does to explain what part one. It's a really nice summary of what part one is about. It's actually really helpful.
Yeah. Was that the same presentation you did on my channel, Colin?
No, a different one.
Oh, different one. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to rewatch it. It's interesting now. Since you were on my channel, I've been looking at the Ethiopic a bit more.
I saw.
So
I was like, yeah. A lot of my followers were calling me and be like, "Oh, did you check this out?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know. Let me go and check it out." And they were excited, like, "Yeah, I've just learned something great, something new from Mel's channel." I was like, "Okay."
How come no one believed me when I started talking about Ethiopia? It's like, Lloyd, you're not talking about Kurdistan, and you're not talking about Iraq, because Islam starts in 570 and it goes north and then nothing happened before that. Nothing.
I was looking at this book today. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah,
it's Gabriel Reynolds' book, and there's a mention there about the story of Abraham and his father, and Abraham confronting him about the idols, and that comes from the Book of Jubilees, which is found in Gaiz. So obviously, whoever wrote the Quran is aware of this, must be able to read Ethiopic, which is unusual, even if Arabia is next door. So I think, guys, you're onto something.
Well, the Ethiopians had a Bible from the mid-second, the third century, right? They had those books, and they'd occupied that region for decades in the 3rd century already, and they had a temple, a cathedral in Marib and in Sanaa. They had several large ones. So they had their Bible, and they traded. They would travel with it, right? Their armies had their priests. And then Mohammed is reputed to have spoken only 2 languages, the second one of which is Ethiopic, right? Or the Ge'ez.
But what's interesting, considering Arabia and the fact that Aramaic was dominant, the word that should be used for the devil should be Satan, because that was the standard word. But they went for the Ethiopic, Shaitan.
Yeah.
So why did they go for that? So that, I think it raised a lot of question marks.
Well, I did an analysis of the 300 major foreign loan words, right? In the Quran, there's over 2,000 foreign loan words, but the 300 major ones are divided roughly 55% are Syriac Aramaic, about 15% are Ethiopic. So that's 70% of the words in the Quran are just from those 2. The rest are Hebrew and Greek, right? And a couple of smatterings of others. But if you take those 275 words out of the Quran you cannot talk about Allah, you can't talk about prayer, you can't talk about worship. Literally, the entire Quranic worship, all of Islamic worship words are from either Aramaic or Ethiopic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's something significant there, you know.
Yeah.
Odon's smiling. I see that. He nodded his
Yeah.
head. He went like, yes.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at the language of the Quran, you come to realize that the revelation didn't come from Arabia or from Arabs.
No.
There are so many other influences and very strong influences from Ethiopia and from a sort of Jewish milieu or Aramaic speaking milieu. And like you said, Lloyd, if you take this part out of the Quran, there is nothing left.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. You'll have words like
Sure.
sand, fighting, but you won't have any religion.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Like some of the key figures around Muhammad in the mythology, we'll call it, because it's not very historical,
No.
but like you mentioned Waraka. I looked it up just there. That's why I kind of jumped in on the live stream. It means leaf, which if you know anything about the story of how the Quran was put together,
A leaf in a
it was
page.
written on stalks and leaves. Right, there's something there in that. And also Bahira. That means like it's, I can't remember which language. It might be Hebrew. I can't remember, but it's
Aramaic.
it means something like esteemed religious figure.
Yeah.
Do you
So what about-
remember, Mel, when we were at in the last INARA conference? Do you remember Gert Twin presentation? He told us that Bahira means teacher in Aramaic.
Well, okay, that's it. I think that was separate to what I come across it more recently. So that's just maybe the second time I've heard it. So yes, I do remember when he said teacher as well. Yeah. Yeah. So it's around that. It's teacher, esteemed figure. That's different layers of meaning, but it's a title essentially. It's not the name of a person.
Teacher in a religious sense.
Well, even the word
Yeah.
Quraysh is a title because it seems to the word the Qurayshi, right? The Qurayshi, the tribe of Muhammad. So if you go back to the Persian Empire, you have Cyrus the Great, as we call it, but his title in Persian would be Kuroshi,
Yeah.
right? He would be Kuroshi, and you got the Qurayshi, and he revived the Jewish tribe. He was part of the revival of the Jewish tribe. He resurrected the Jewish tribe. He was the servant of God, right?
But
So you've got Kuroshi,
also he's
Qurayshi.
but for the Jews, he's a Messiah as well. So you have a messianic figure, but
Yes, yeah. So Kuroshi,
but-
Qurayshi, the similarity is way too similar for those
Yeah.
two words. So
there's a guy on my channel we call him the linguist, but he's found what is the language now? Ugaritic. He's found an inscription where Koresh means little temple, or what's the other translation? Like a sanctuary. For example, the Ark of the Covenant could be described as a Koresh. So it's something that's a miniature temple or something that contains the divine, or that has that kind of meaning.
but
The
Ugaritic
residence
is
of a
Syria
god.
as well. That's Canaanite language. That's Syrian. So another link to Syria then.
I've done something on this which is kind of like completely off, which is a translation of the Quran. Looking at retranslating the Quran and looking at these keywords such as Quraysh, and I kind of link it to the Sabaic, South Arabic word Quraysh as well, which basically means sheep. And when you relook at it, and if you or flock of sheep, basically, and if you relook at it, you will see that it looks like it is a reworking of a particular psalm. I'll have to show you guys it, and I would love for you guys to
Let
give
me show you that.
If it means sheep in a Christian
show you
context, that could be a reference to the congregation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something to do with the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And if you look at that particular psalm and you look at that Quranic Quraysh surah itself, and you line it up, you see that it's hitting on the same theme, line after line of guidance and going towards the house of worship and so forth. So it's very interesting. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm saying this is my retranslation. I would love to get some feedback from you guys.
Well, I think there's something interesting. The word Silam, the root of Islam, means graven idol, right? Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, right? So we're often told in the Arabic it's Silam, Salam, Islam, but it's a very common Semitic word, and in the Bible it typically means image or heathen gods, right? And Silam is its earliest known form is the name of Shalim, the ancient god of dusk of Ugarit in the Ugaritic.
Wow.
It's Venus, the evening star. So, yeah, and you have it in Akkadian, Aramaic, Salma, image, idol, graven idol. You find it in the Nabatean, Palmyrene, and Arab. You find it in ancient pre-Islamic Arabia. It's a very common word. Islam. This whole thing has got to do with graven idols. And
St. John of Damascus mentions Aphrodite as being the black stone, which is otherwise known as Venus. So that's, if you're correct there, you have a triangulation there between all those data points.
Definitely. And I just wanted to just bring this particular article up for you guys. I'd love for you guys to just Psalm 23, Scrunchy. Love for you guys to read this in your own spare time. It's from Irfan Shahid. It's called Islam Against Christianos, Makkah, 610 to 622 AD. And it basically highlights the Abyssinian Ethiopian connection as well. So it goes through a lot to show that, the Abyssinians were very much so prevalent within inside of Mecca itself. It seems as though that, certain imagery within inside of the Kaaba could be traced back to that. It shows that, the armies inside of Mecca were made up of the Habish itself, which were the Ethiopians. It shows that, so that's that there. It shows that the Habashis had obviously their own Bibles, and they were there. They were the ones that were said to actually have taught Muhammad inside of Mecca. He would sit at the booth of Jabir, the Ethiopian, and listen to the Bible being recited. That Muhammad obviously spoke the Ethiopic language. That certain terms within inside of the Quran, such Christianic terms inside of the Quran, such as Jesus, Isa, comes from Ethiopic, the 12, i.e. the Hawariyun. The word gospel, Injil, obviously comes from the Ethiopic Wangel, and so forth. So it has some very good stuff in there. So
I think in Ethiopic it's Wangil.
Wangel, yeah.
Yeah, there's no G in the Ethiopic. I believe it's Wangil.
Yeah. So it's very interesting just to it goes through it, and he says out of all of it, nobody thought that there would be an Ethiopian connection, but the only language that we know that he spoke and all the Ethiopian connections inside of the Quran is clearly there for everybody to see. So very good book, I would say.
The closest language to Southern Arabian is Ethiopic, and Ethiopic has all the sounds of Arabic.
Yes.
So I covered that before, but the article I covered before, where the closest language, and it says to Arabic would be I'll try and find it, but yeah.
I think probably we can actually continue with the conversation for a little while longer if you guys want. But Kalam, I think you said that you had to actually dash off.
Yeah.
So hopefully we actually can pick this up again soon.
Let me show one last thing. Abyssinian, philologically Ethiopic, the ancient language of Abyssinia, is the most closely related to Arabic of all the Semitic languages.
Indeed. And it's very interesting because once you start reading the Ethiopic, I've started to teach myself some Ge'ez and the Sabaic, and it's like, wow, there's so much parallels inside of the language and inside of the culture and the customs. It's very, very interesting. I would really love for a native born Abyssinian to come out and just kind of teach this information, because for us, we're outsiders looking in and finding this very intriguing, but I'm sure that they've got access to the language and to books that we don't have access to. And if they can actually come on here and actually teach what is it like? Because Mel brought out some interesting information on how the Abyssinians actually described the Muslims and the terms that they use, in regards to them. So it's like, I would just love, please, if any of my Habashi brothers and sisters out there, if you're watching this, please come on in and just kind of like teach us some information, because
I'd second that. Like, it shouldn't be the likes of me from Ireland that's finding stuff out about Ethiopia, or even it's a tiny bit. Like, they're Ethiopians sitting on information that they should be sharing, and who knows what they know. They may not realize how important it is.
We didn't know Kalam a few years ago, but I started speaking extensively. I mean, we've had long conversations about Ethiopia. What was so difficult to believe about me posing Ethiopia as a source? Because remember, I complained about J. Smith being stuck at 570 plus and only north. I mean, what was so hard to think about Ethiopia as a source? Because Kalam makes a very strong argument. Your thoughts?
Is that to Kalam or me?
No, to you. Well, what made it so hard to accept Ethiopia as a source?
Well, for me, it was, I suppose, there's a temptation that you're looking for it's like, what is Occam's razor. You're trying to find the simplest explanation. And there was a lot of convergence up in the north, and still are. But then if you have other stuff that's happening hundreds of miles away, that makes things a little bit more complicated. I suppose that would be my initial sort of hesitation. And also the problem is there's sometimes coincidences happen. There's also similarities that happen across languages. And the other thing is, for example, the vocabulary side of things, we need to be aware that because of trade, keywords travel, and they haven't just got to the writers of the Quran because they went to Ethiopia. It's likely that Ethiopic words were in Arabia as well. So that's
the Ethiopians were in Arabia. But now you've got archaeology, you've got historical records, you've got this, just the amount of connectivity is adding up. It's not just the one word, it's extensive.
Oh, absolutely. But that was where I was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. But as you're presenting new evidence, I'm kind of beginning to go, okay, I need to take it a bit more seriously now.
Let's let Kalam go, and then we continue a little bit.
Guys, let him go.
I'm going to be. Thank you. I'll have you guys in my headphone. If you're continuing live on air still, I'll have you guys in my headphone. But family, I've got to go and deal with family right now. So
okay, cool, man. Thanks. We'll be in touch.
The panel section.
Awesome presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So yeah, guys, we can wind down. I mean, your thoughts. But I mean, Kalam he's been doing this longer than I have, but I mean, he's only gone really public with it, at least in our group recently. I came out with this some time ago. It wasn't very well accepted, but now it seems to become like, yeah, we all knew that. It's obvious.
I think is that Kalam is very focused, like on that area. And when anyone of us, maybe we've been doing research, we've been all over the place looking at many different areas. So it's good to have one researcher who will zero in on one area, a little bit like with Dan Gibson, and then just looking at every single possibility around Petra. Because like this, we can get the things that work and the ones that don't. Also, I think Usama said something at the beginning. Everything in Islam is a lie. Every time they say something is a lie, it shouldn't surprise us that this whole thing is really such a mess. And since the Quran has words in so many languages, it is also possible that the Quran comes predominantly from one region, then they put it all together as a mess because it has no order, it has nothing. But the Quran and the traditions are two different beasts. So it's possible that much of what we are discussing here, maybe most of it is correct. A lot of it happened in the north, a lot of it happened in the south, and a lot of it happened hundreds of years later. So it's like you said, Lloyd, we just take all of these pieces, we put them all on the table, and then we see, okay, how do we make them all fit? But it's possible that it's all of those empires all combined over hundreds of years.
No, we're reverse engineering it now, right? What's fabrication? What is myth that is built on historical fact? What is a bit of editing? What's a little, you got to figure that. Well, what's a red herring? All of these
Yeah.
things, we're starting to reverse engineer it now and creating a coherent narrative. And look, we're all converging on the same point.
Yeah.
I think we know, yes, there's a northern aspect. Yes, there's a southern aspect. Yes, there's an African aspect. Now it's working out what do we throw away? What do we keep? Right?
Yeah. And it's finding at the hypothesis that ably brings it all together in a coherent fashion as far as is possible. That's the crucial bit.
Yeah, and we can tie it to history. Kalam's provided a lot of evidence. We can start. This gives us a framework, a historical framework to work off of, and then from there you can compare the myth to the facts, right? And how could they plausibly have created a fiction on top of that?
Yeah. I think the obvious thing that we can all agree on is that an awful lot of fiction was created, an awful lot of lies were told. But believe it or not, there are a lot of Christian apologists who still accept a large part of the Islamic story. And they are unfortunately undermining what we're trying to do by
they don't know any better.
Right.
Saint Thomas Aquinas, when he wrote about Islam, he sort of took the Islamic narrative for granted. He spoke about Muhammad as a prophet and so on. So
yeah, and in fact, I mean, now they are
the benefits of what we know now, but
and now they're smearing John of Damascus as, oh yeah, he clearly didn't know what he was talking about because he doesn't support the standard narrative. I mean, they're really attacking the guy now.
Yeah.
And maybe he was right,
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually,
I don't think that part of John of Damascus was actually written by him. I think it was added at a later period, but it's not. It doesn't matter either way because it's still a record which contradicts the later narrative. It shows that the narrative has changed, and that's the key thing.
Agreed.
And it probably went through many iterations. It's a bit like fixing software. It goes through many iterations. They find a bug, they fix it, and I think that was what you were presenting in the last summer, Odin. The way that the narrative is generated, it's a
the vicious circle, the process that fabricated Islam. Yeah.
Agreed.
With iteration, corrections.
Yeah, I mean the hardware was fixed, so the existing hardware was fixed, so they had to fiddle with the software.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's impossible to cover every hole, and they've left breadcrumbs everywhere for us to kind of gather up and decipher it.
You've got Ted Bird says Waraka in Ge'ez is paper, the one who reads, i.e., someone intelligent.
Wow.
It's the same. It has the same meaning as Bahira in the end.
Bahira, but teacher could be rabbi as well.
Yeah, a rabbi, but someone who teaches.
Yeah.
And who teaches from the scriptures.
Yeah. I mean, the audience seems to be convinced of the thesis that it has credibility, I mean, the only people who disagreed were trolls.
And probably Christian apologists, although I think Christian apologists will actually see the light. They realize that much of the narrative is a fabrication, but then they will pick and choose some sections and say, okay, well, that one is true. Well, that one is true. It's like, no. I start with the whole thing is false, okay, and read things critically and see what happens. And even through the Quran, we see it tells a very different story. And these things are starting to snowball. So I think it's only a matter of time before people realizes that it must.
I mean,
that
you can
whole
see the
narrative
construction.
is
Like
false.
all of the talk of prophets in the Quran is from the Hebrew, right? Everything about prophets is from the Hebrew. Then everything about prayer is from this language, and everything about this aspect is from that language. So you can see they've constructed from different cultures. They've built. It's not organic. It's constructed.
Well, if you were trying to create a new religion in the 7th century, isn't that what you would do? It'd be like Mambo number 5. You take a little bit from
Oh.
the Syrians, a little bit from the Egyptians, a little bit from the Ethiopians, and you mesh it together.
Yep.
But I think it probably evolved organically. I don't think it was a conspiracy, but it looks, at first glance, it looks very much like a conspiracy, but I think it happened in stages and it formed organically.
Yeah, when you get
it was not a new religion. I don't think it was a new religion. It was, like you said, Mel, it started from existing religion.
Yes.
The waiting for the Messiah, for example, and it evolved. It evolved gradually, but there were some treachery and some deceit in the process. It's not that organic.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah. I think I've kind of alluded to that as well earlier. There's a lot of lies and they know what they're up to, But I do think a very rich vein in all of this is to try and identify where names in the narrative turn out to be titles, because I think that kind of can.
Quraysh is a title as well. Quraysh technically would be a title as well. So there's a lot of things that are titles and not actual names, but they've repurposed these things.
Yeah.
Muhammad, Ali.
Yeah.
And so on. Yeah. Of course. But you'll see, it's already making sense in my mind, but I have to chew on it.
Do you want to hear my crazy idea of the day?
Yeah, come on.
Yep, go for it.
Yeah, this is total speculation, so please don't kill me for this. So in the Quran, it talks about the story of Iblis and Adam, and Iblis refuses to bow down to Adam. Okay, yeah. And it's used 7 times in the Quran, so it seems like overkill to repeat the same story 7 times. So it must have some symbolic or personal importance. But here's the thing: the story is discussed in this, and that's why I kind of bring it up today. But there are sources that talk about Adam in terms which can only point to Christ, right? Refers to him as priest, prophet, and king, leader, Lord. This is from a Christian source talking about Adam, right? Now,
Adam was none of those.
The Quran is talking about Adam and Iblis, and Adam is Christ, and Iblis is the next Messiah. Iblis is, now this is my crazy idea, is actually the author of the Quran. He is the person who will not bow down to Christ and wants to basically, who views himself as greater because he is created from the fire, not from the earth. So that's my crazy idea of the day. I'm kind of exploring it at the minute, so it's pure speculation. But I
would run with it because intuitions like that, you never know where they end up. There's a reason for it, so I'd run with it.
Yeah, it's just the Quran plays these sort of coded messages. That was something AJ Juice got me kind of onto, and I messaged him about this, and I said, listen, this is a crazy idea. And he says, it's a bit like what you've said. He says, there might be more in it than you first suspect.
Yeah, I would. That's the kind of idea that I would run with and see where we go, because it's got something to it. So
yeah. It kind of reminds me, you have Mahmed and Ahmed. Ahmed is the second person after Mahmed. And then you also have Adam and Iblis. You have this pairing going on. So that's where I'm at.
That's a great thing. The Jews have that going on, and they've just taken the idea and modified it.
Yeah. I have a feeling there's something to it, but obviously it's purely without proof or anything like that. So it's just a concept.
Yeah. So guys, when shall we do the next one like this? I mean, then maybe we can, Oda, maybe you can lead with the Jerusalem thesis and then see if it overlaps with the whole. And then also, look, there's a lot of pagan stuff. I know everyone, there's supposed to be zero paganism ever in whole South Arabia, and it's got nothing to do with Islam. Islam doesn't have anything to do with Islam, as we know. But there are just too many archaeological and other parallels to pagan and even Iranian religion. It's just and there's the Yemeni religion, the Ethiopian pre-Christian religion. It's just there's way too many of these things.
Yeah. If you want me to rumble on Jerusalem in the Quran and in early Islam, I'm your man. And
Yes.
I also agree. There were no real pagan activity, but there is a very strong pagan flavor in early Islam and in the Quran and in Islam in general.
Yeah, it's more than just minor. And I mean, if you go to the history, you go to their stories. If you read, I've got a book it's on Arab narratives and Arab practice up to the time of Muhammad. All right. And these people were primitive, and these people believed in jinns and demons, possession, and they were very violent, very bloodthirsty, and they were very pagan, right?
But that's the way every recently Christianized population is.
Yeah, but their poetry, their stories, there's records of them. These things are not exactly, shall we say, Islamic or Christian.
Having been Christianized, such as the Arabs were in the 7th century, doesn't mean you forget everything about your past, your customs, your reverence to stones, sources, ancient deities. But it doesn't mean you're
Hey, is Hussein Mashki here?
Yeah.
Oh, where is
Can I give you an example? 4th century, Ireland became a Catholic country, completely Christianized. And even to today, there are fields that farmers will not cut the grass because that's the home of the fairies. And they will actually direct roads around fairy hills and things like that, And we're talking the 21st century.
Yeah, so we have the same in France. Exactly the same. Not with fairies, of course. This is for Irish people, but
So is that Hussein Mashni? Oh wow! Hey man, you know what? We were talking about you not that long ago, man. We got to get you on. Wow, how are you doing, man? Nice. Hussein is here, so we need to. Yeah, you're right. So there's something. So look, we need to work out proportions, put them on a timeline. We need to, do something. And but there's a lot to discuss here. There's so much to discuss. Hussein, reach out to me or reach out to Usama, because I think we tried to get a hold of you one time for a couple of streams, and Usama reached out, and I don't think we got hold of you. I think I reached out to you on Teams, but because we were on planning some streams and we couldn't reach you. But please, let's get together. So guys, so Usama, Odon.
Yeah.
So maybe we can do the Jerusalem thesis, revisit that, and see if we have some new insights. And see how we can tie some of this together, because these things are all somehow interconnected.
Like I said, I'm your man.
Sounds like a plan. So any last words, anyone? Mel, JC, Odon?
Well, that was really, really nice. A lot to chew on, like I said. This calls for more digging, more sneaking. Thank you, Lloyd, for setting up this panel.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, JC was the one who first hatched the idea. He was the one who first came up with the idea. So, JC, any last words from you before we?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for hosting, and thank you everybody for watching. It's great to actually see that we're trying to put all of the pieces of the jigsaw on a massive table and then trying to see how everything fits. Everybody seems to have different pieces of this massive jigsaw. So if we speak, we will probably solve it in no time.
Yeah. I'm probably the closest of everyone to solving it,
I've already solved it.
Oh, the French way ahead of us, you know. Yeah, Mel,
I
any thoughts?
wonder if they dug up a hole somewhere in Arabia and they found all these books with the whole thing solved. Would we be happy or disappointed
Happy,
or relieved?
very happy.
Happy,
Very happy.
Maybe happy. I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough one.
happy.
I mean,
Great minds think alike.
you know, the question is, how soon can we take Islam down before Islam takes Europe and the rest of the world down, right? We're in a bit of a race here, you know.
Well, I'm hopeful with Iran is going to change in the next few weeks. It's looking that way. So if I know that 50% have left Islam in Iran. Those are maybe even 60%.
Yeah.
Iran is a good example. If you take apart the American propaganda and so on, but Iran, I think, is undergoing the same process as the Soviet Union. There was a revolution which was supposed to give happiness and peace, and it failed miserably, and the people the people realize it, and in the end, the system crumbles and cannot continue.
Yeah.
So it's really what happens next. Hopefully, they'll get a proper secular constitution and just people get a bit of freedom. Hopefully it'll have a knock-on effect in the countries around it.
Yeah, I think, you know what, the work that we're doing, I'm sure has an effect. It is having an effect. Muslims are clearly troubled by this. There were no ex-Muslims 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see. But the thing with Iran is that no Muslim country around Iran, even if they are Sunni countries, wants Iran to be what it is supposed to be, the great Persia, a great power with intelligent people, with engineers, knowledge, and so on. And so, paradoxically, Sunni powers might support a Shia, the Shia regime in Iran.
Yeah, they don't want to see
Lloyd,
the caliphate fall. Yep.
Actually, Lloyd, you've been deployed in the Middle East and you understand basically all of that very well. Maybe you should do a talk about what is happening over there. Might be interesting.
Yeah, maybe I can look into that. Yeah, I wasn't allowed to travel to Iran. It was against my my work contract because the U.S. government could throw me in prison for that.
Yeah,
so, that was fun times. Fun times. Yeah, we can definitely talk about that. I mean, the Iranians are a serious threat, but yeah, at least they seem to be falling apart right now.
You know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but apart from all that's going on politically, Iran has got a massive water shortage where they're seriously talking about moving the capital to another area because they just don't have enough water.
And the Israelis are willing to help them, right? If they would simply just get their heads out of their butts.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's seriously bad. It makes Islam look bad, which is great though. But yeah, I've met Iranians. I mean, they're great people. You know, they're just very educated. It's a 6,000-year-old civilization.
Yeah.
They even translated my book into their language. So
I see.
They must be intelligent.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they are. I mean, so once you meet them, they were very seriously. I've worked with them and I've had them as neighbors and very intelligent people. Pity about Islam, but yeah. So guys, let's call it a night. So we'll be in touch for next week, and we'll see where we go when we do the next one. But Odons, maybe you can come up and we'll do Jerusalem thesis and see if we can tie all this. It's another part of this, you know. See if we find any new insights here.
Yeah.
Now we'll let you know. Usama, everyone's will multi-stream on.
What was that? You just broke up there.
Yeah,
I can multi-stream the broadcast to everyone's channels. At the moment, I'm multi-streaming to.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be cool to be able to do that.
So guys, so thank you all, everyone. Yeah, so we'll call it a night here, but this has been really interesting. A lot of food for thought from Kalam. And thanks for the contributions, guys. Really appreciate the time and effort, and JC for the original idea. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Cool.
Okay, guys, take care. God bless. Good
All
night.
the best, guys. Take care.
Bye.